We all grieve over the death of a loved one. Most of the time we feel great grief when our loved ones die. Perhaps you have had a similar experience. But what happens if a dead person really comes back? So today, we are going to tell you about the people who attended their own funeral. 1. Timothy Dexter. Eccentric 18th-century millionaire Timothy Dexter wanted to know what people thought about him. He decided to hold a mock funeral, hide, and see how his death affected the guests. Dexter sent out a notice, which claimed he had died, and his family invited people to his funeral. Over 3,000 people attended the ceremony. Dexter's family greeted the mourners. The grieving guests were led inside and seated in front of an extravagant coffin. A man, who Dexter had hired to pose as a priest, read a long eulogy, which Dexter had written. After he finished speaking, the coffin was carried to the garden and buried. A feast followed the service. However, the meal was interrupted by a loud noise coming from the kitchen. The guests opened the door and saw Dexter beating his wife. He was angry because he thought that she had not cried enough during the service. 2. Gilberto Araujo. In 2012, Jose Marcos received a phone call from the police. They told him his brother, Gilberto Araujo, had been killed, and his body was in the morgue. Marcos had to go to the police station and identify his brother's body. He confirmed that the dead man was Araujo. Araujo's family planned a funeral for the dead man. As the mourners gathered to grieve around the casket, Araujo showed up at the front door. His appearance terrified the guests. Some people fainted, and others fled in panic. A friend told Araujo that his body was in the nearby coffin. Araujo assured his loved ones that he was alive, and he offered to let them pinch him to prove it. Araujo told his family that he had recently learned of the mistake from an acquaintance, who told him that his family was preparing his funeral. He tried to call and tell them he was alive, but they thought that it was a cruel prank. The family returned the body to the police, who discovered the corpse's true identity, Genivaldo Santos Gama, a man who closely resembled Araujo. 3. Felix Bush, Brazil. Felix Brazil spent 5 years planning his own funeral. As he'd never married or had many friends, Brazil was eager to hear what the preacher had to say about him. His bizarre funeral in 1938 gained national attention, and 8,000 people attended. Vendors sold soft drinks and hot dogs, and the spectacle had a carnival-like atmosphere. Brazil arrived in a hearse, seated next to the driver. Guests mobbed him when he stepped out of the vehicle. Brazil needed help from state troopers to get inside the funeral tent. He sat in a chair next to his self-made coffin, and he listened to the preacher give a eulogy. Hundreds of people approached him after the ceremony. Brazil shook their hands, and he signed autographs. He was pleased with the service, and he said that it was the nicest that he had attended. Brazil died 5 years later in 1943. As he requested, no funeral was given. 4. Zhang Jie. In 2013, after attending her grandfather's funeral, Zhang Jie decided to have a funeral of her own. Zhang scheduled a ceremony at a funeral home and invited her friends and family. She bought flowers, rented a coffin, and hired a photographer. She even hired makeup artists to make her look like a corpse. Then she lay in a coffin while holding her favorite Hello Kitty doll. Zhang closed her eyes and listened to her friends and family eulogize her. They said what they thought about her, and Zhang believed that their speeches helped give her a better understanding of herself and how she was seen by others. Zhang spent an hour in the coffin, and she kept her eyes closed during the ceremony. She almost burst into tears when she opened her eyes. She felt the world had changed. Zhang claimed that the experience made her value her life more. 5. Zhang Deyong. Zhang Deyong never married or had children, and he worried about his afterlife. In Chinese culture, the dead are believed to have the same needs as the living. Families are expected to arrange for the funerals and pay regular visits to the deceased's grave. Zhang worried that no one would take care of him after he died. In 2016, he decided to organize a mock funeral, and he invited his friends and family. Around 40 of his loved ones attended, along with several hundred curious people from nearby villages. Zhang was delighted with his ceremony. He enjoyed watching the pretend mourners bow their heads in prayer at his feet. Zhang even crawled into his fake grave toward the end of the funeral. Zhang's mock funeral also included a mock wedding to a dead woman, as it is seen as unlucky to go into the afterlife without a spouse. For more interesting facts, stay with us, subscribe and turn on the notification by simply tapping the bell icon and selecting all. See you soon with a new video.